This is The Best Defense. I'm Jami Floyd. Wisconsin prosecutors said Mark Jensen had a motive for murder. They say he wanted to avoid a divorce, but be rid of his wife, Julie, once and for all. So they say he took matters into his own hands and began to poison her with antifreeze. The jury agreed and found him guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. And with me to talk about the case, one of my favorite guests of all, forensic psychologist Dr. J. Buzz Von Ornsteiner. Buzz, I want you to know I don't say that every day.
Great.
I only say it when I mean it. It's terrific to have you with us because, of course, you are a forensic psychologist. So what does it tell you that this jury wanted to see everything essentially again? And what does it say to you, the pieces of evidence that they asked to see?
Great jury and very methodical and step by step trying to piece together this puzzle. You want to be absolutely certain, and this jury was doing their job. I can't help but think, though, the letter from the grave is on everybody's mind. That letter from Julie Jensen saying that if I die, my husband's responsible was so pervasive, I am sure, in all the jury members' mind. But they wanted to be clear, and they wanted to find out piece by piece that it truly was Mark Jensen who did poison his wife. It couldn't just be a letter from the grave. It was those internet searches. It was the combination of everything piling up, really in a crescendo, to show that Mark Jensen was guilty of murder.
So, Dr. Buzz, if you have just Julie Jensen's words from the grave,
yes,
is that enough, do you think, for this jury to convict?
It's not, but boy, is that a haunting letter. And boy, do we know that Julie Jensen was trying to get out of a conflicted marriage. She didn't have the tools to leave. She wanted to find those tools. She was getting her last semester done so she could become a nurse, so she could become financially dependent. She was trying to make the steps. She had seen her general medical doctor, and he had prescribed some medication, but it wasn't a psychologist. It wasn't someone who could support her. It wasn't someone who could show her the steps that she needed to take to gain her freedom. It doesn't sound like she had a lot of support there, but she was taking the steps. Depressed or not, she was taking those steps that hopefully could lead to her escape.
And real quickly, Buzz, because I want to listen to a little more of what the jury had to say on just this point, abuse. It isn't always about physical abuse, is it?
Absolutely not. There can be tremendous verbal abuse, and the verbal abuse can be very, very detrimental in a marriage when you've been married to someone for 14 years. You get adjusted to it. It's very hard to have strength. It's very hard to see things clearly when you're in a conflicted marriage, when there are children involved and you're financially dependent and you don't see solutions so easily. In hindsight, we think she's very weak. In hindsight, we don't understand why she just couldn't leave. But I can assure you, I work with many women who are trapped in very, very damaging marriages, and their self-value, their own self-image is so low that they really have trouble making those steps.
So talk with me about how these children can possibly cope, whatever the sentence, with this set of facts and circumstances.
It's tragic. Their mother's dead. Their mother's been murdered by their father. They haven't had a mother in their life for 10 years. And I'm sure they have memories of when their mother was sick and she was very, very ill, and they were pleading with their father to take their mother to the hospital. But time does heal things, and if you only have one parent, that parent becomes your only emotional connection. It doesn't matter what your parent did sometimes. Sometimes parents can do very bad things, but they're also the parents that do very good things, and the child does support that parent, and the child does want that parent in their life.
Is it necessary, Buzz, as a coping mechanism for the children to deny that in their mind the father committed the horrible act, or is it better to accept it and then to move on from that point? I mean, this is an extraordinary circumstance, but what is the better psychological approach for a child who finds himself or herself in this kind of a case?
In my opinion, as a forensic psychologist, I've worked with many children whose parents were murderers. I worked with many children who were molested by their parents. I worked with many children who were molested by a step-parent, and the biological parent did nothing. They still love their parent, regardless of the conflicted feelings, regardless of the lack of perceived support. They're still their parent, and they want that parent in their life. Personally, I feel that that communication and acceptance of the crime is essential for the child to grow and learn and develop appropriately. That would take some time. That would take a tremendous amount of coping mechanisms throughout your life, and hopefully they can achieve that, because he's still your parent. Better to know the truth. Better to work with a truthful communication than to be in denial. When you're in denial, your perception is skewed. You're still conflicted, and there's still an emotional weight that we carry with us. I believe in communication. I believe communication is the first step, Jamie.
Yeah. And this was really as much psychology as it was law, this closing argument. So tell us a little bit about what you just heard and how it feeds into your notions of psychology as much as it does into my notions of law.
I think it's actually great the way he described it. He's not as dramatic, he's not screaming or yelling, but he's stating the facts. He's stating how Mark Jensen systematically, emotionally abused his wife over years. But he did go into the daily abuse, the systematic abuse that Mark Jensen did to lower her ability to function, to skew her perception, to skew her brain, to make her less able to defend herself, to make her less able to have power and control in her life, to make her less able to leave because she was so worried that she would not be able to take her children with her. She wanted to leave. He worked on her in such a systematic, psychological way that she really did not have the tools to escape.
Here's what I don't understand about this relationship, Buzz. Most people get a divorce.
Yes. You're absolutely right.
And then time and again on our network, we see people that choose death instead of divorce. Why? Why not just get the divorce? What is so dysfunctional in these relationships? What is so, and here I'm looking at Mark Jensen, not at the victim. What is it in the psychology of some men and occasionally women that they would prefer this way out of the marriage to the more conventional?
First off, divorce is not that easy. We tend to simplify divorce a great deal. I know many, many married couples who come and see me. Granted, no one ever comes and sees me when they're happy, but they stay together based on a lot of very complex reasons. I agree. If a marriage is conflicted, there's no shame in getting a divorce. Leave. It's not a good situation. It's not enhancing, but people do stay. They stay for many, many reasons. One is financially. They don't like the idea of paying this person another amount of money on a monthly basis. Julie Jensen was financially dependent on her husband. Julie Jensen was a stay-at-home mom. Julie Jensen would be taking her children that she loved with her. Mark Jensen didn't want that. He wanted those children. They were a reflection of himself. They were his identity in those children. He didn't want to pay Julie Jensen a dime. He wanted his mistress. He wanted to marry her, and Julie Jensen was literally some obstacle in his way. She was literally the obstacle that he didn't want, and he wanted to destroy her.
What's the lesson of this case, the Mark Jensen murder trial?
One is, when I think of Julie Jensen, I think of a salmon going upstream. She was a fighter. Julie Jensen loved her children. I think I want to hold on to that for as long as I live. She had a great love, and that love will survive. And if there's anything I can say is to hope that her children someday realize their mother's love and find some inner peace.
And do you believe they can?
Yes, I absolutely do, Jamie. I tend to be really very optimistic when it comes to children. Children are very, very resilient. And although I work with criminals on a daily basis, I work with many, many children who, in spite of their parents' behaviors, in spite of their parents' personality disorders, they still can come to some level of peace.
See, if you're going to work with the murderers and the criminals and the deviants, the children are what keep you grounded. They give us hope, and they are really our insight into the good in humanity and all that we can be. And that, I think, is the message of a case like this, and that you always bring, Dr. Buzz. And with that, the best defense will rest for the day. A very big thank you to one of my all-time favorite guests, Dr. J. Buzz von Ornsteiner, for joining me today.